If we have an algebraic equation and we ask to find the variable, we can use a technique called the addition principle of equality to get that variable. The main point is to get the variable by itself. Get the variable by itself, get the variable by itself, get the variable by itself, and whatever is done on one side of the equation, we do exactly the same thing on the other side of the equal sign. Get the variable by itself, and whatever is done on one side of the equation, we do exactly the same thing on the other side of the equal sign. The idea is to think of the algebra equation as a balance. Therefore, you cannot keep it out of balance. So if something is removed on one side by subtracting, we must remove that same something on the next side to keep it balanced. Let us use the addition principle of equality with this example here. Remember, the important point is that we're trying to establish x by itself, and whatever is done on one side, we must do exactly the same thing on the other side of the equation of the equal sign. So therefore, if I tell myself that I want my x to remain on this side of the equal sign, then this means that I must remove the positive 5. In order to get rid of the positive 5, I must do the opposite of positive 5, which is subtract 5. Remember again, if we think of this as a balance, if we remove 5 on this side of the equal sign, on the other side of the equal sign, we must do exactly the same procedure. And from there, we decide to simplify. X, there's no x, no other x on this side here, so x remains. But positive 5 minus 5 gives me 0, so nothing is written here. My equal sign now comes back. And then 7 minus 5 gives me 2. Therefore, x is 2. A fairly simple example, but uses exactly the idea that we can use when we're trying to deal with more complicated examples. Here's a second example. Negative 8 is equal to x minus 6. What is x? Again, idea is we're trying to get the x by itself. But notice next to the x we have a negative 6. So we need to get rid of that negative 6, which is right next to the x. To get rid of the negative 6, we do the opposite of negative 6, which is plus 6. So we add 6 here. Remember, if this is a balance, whatever is done on one side of the equal sign, we must do exactly the same thing on the other side of the equal sign. So I plus 6 here also. And from there now, I simplify. If I simplify my problem, negative 8 plus 6 gives me negative 2. My equal sign here will return. X, there's no other x to deal with the x, so the x remains. Negative 6 plus 6 becomes 0. Therefore, this negative 6 disappears, which is exactly what I want. This means negative 2 is x. Therefore, x is negative 2. Last but not least, third example. I am given negative 6y minus 3 plus 7y minus 7 is equal to 4. And the question asks me to solve for the variable y. First step, we have to use things that we have learned before. The best approach for this problem is to simplify the expression first. So if I'm working on this side and I'm trying to simplify my problem, this would become negative 6y have to get combined with the positive 7y. So negative 6y plus 7y simply becomes y. Because negative 6 plus 7 is 1, there's no need to write the 1, because since we have the y, it already signifies that we have 1y. Now, negative 3 need to combine with negative 7. So negative 3 plus negative 7 gives me negative 10. So this portion of my equation is simplified to this. Equal sign now comes back. 4 now comes back. And notice how simple my problem looks. We get right back to our main point. We want to get the variable by itself. But there's a negative 10 right next to that variable. So to get rid of that negative 10, I simply need to do the opposite of negative 10, which is add 10. To keep the problem balanced, if I add 10 on this side, I must add 10 on the next side. And now I simplify. Y comes back. Negative 10 plus 10 becomes 0. Perfect. Equal sign now comes back. And now 4 plus 10 gives me 14. Therefore, y is 14.